what 17-year-old Emily Rodriguez was about to discover at the prestigious Millbrook Country Club would expose a $50 million political money laundering operation that reached the highest levels of the current presidential administration, and put her farming family directly in the crosshairs of Washington. Power brokers who had spent 8 years keeping these campaign finance violations buried beneath charity galas and elite social events. Before we dive into this incredible story, tell us where you're watching from, and if this grabs your attention, make sure you're subscribed, because what 17-year-old Emily Rodriguez discovered at the prestigious Millbrook Country Club will absolutely blow your mind. A $50 million political money laundering operation that reached the highest levels of the current presidential administration and put her farming family directly in the crosshairs of Washington power brokers, who had spent 8 years keeping these campaign finance violations buried beneath charity galas and elite social events. But let's start from the beginning. The manicured lawns and pristine golf courses of Millbrook Country Club in Westchester County, New York, sprawled across 847 acres of what had once been a Gilded Age robber baron's estate. Since its establishment in 1923, the club had served as the exclusive playground for America's political and financial elite. Its Georgian Revival Clubhouse, a monument to old money and older power. The club's membership roster read like a shadow government directory: 3 Supreme Court justices, 12 senators, 47 House representatives, and enough Fortune 500 CEOs to control a significant portion of America's GDP. Within these hallowed halls, surrounded by oil paintings of former presidents and beneath crystal chandeliers that had witnessed a century of backroom deals, the real business of American governance was conducted. $1 million handshakes disguised as friendly golf wagers determined federal judicial appointments. Charity auction paddle raises that seemed spontaneous actually represented carefully orchestrated campaign contribution schemes. The annual membership fees of $125,000 per year served as convenient vehicles for moving money between corporate interests and political campaigns in ways that avoided federal election law scrutiny. The club's imposing wrought-iron gates, monitored by discrete security systems and staffed by personnel with military backgrounds, projected an image of American aristocracy that had been carefully cultivated to provide the perfect backdrop for activities that required absolute privacy and complete discretion. Behind the facade of tennis tournaments and charity galas, Millbrook had evolved into something far more significant than a social club. It had become the unofficial headquarters for a shadow financial network that influenced everything from environmental regulations to federal court nominations. Dr. Patricia Hawthorne, the club's general manager for the past 12 years, had transformed what was once a traditional country club into a sophisticated political operations center. Her background in campaign finance law and her connections throughout Washington's regulatory agencies had made her invaluable to members who needed to navigate increasingly complex federal election laws while maintaining their traditional methods of political influence. Under her management, Millbrook had developed innovative approaches to political fundraising that pushed the boundaries of legal campaign finance while maintaining plausible deniability through the club's social and charitable activities. The club's event calendar reflected this dual-purpose: wine tastings that coincided with federal regulatory hearings, golf tournaments scheduled during crucial Senate votes, and charity auctions timed to provide maximum political benefit to specific candidates. The annual Children's Education Foundation Gala alone had raised over $12 million in the previous year, with funds distributed through a network of subsidiary organizations that ultimately supported political activities while maintaining their charitable tax status. 15 miles from Millbrook's manicured splendor, the Rodriguez Organic Farm represented everything the club's members either romanticized or sought to control. Miguel and Carmen Rodriguez had immigrated from Mexico in 1987 with agricultural science degrees from Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico and a dream of contributing to America's sustainable food production. Their journey from graduate students to successful organic farmers embodied the kind of immigrant success story that politicians celebrated in speeches while working systematically to undermine the economic conditions that made such success possible. The 127-acre farm had been purchased with a combination of savings, family loans, and a USDA beginning farmer loan that Miguel and Carmen had qualified for despite the bureaucratic obstacles typically faced by immigrant farmers. Their bilingual skills and advanced degrees had helped them navigate the complex certification processes required for organic operations, but it was their innovative approach to sustainable agriculture that had made their farm genuinely successful. Rather than merely surviving, Rodriguez Organic Farm specialized in heritage varieties of tomatoes, peppers, and stone fruits that had been nearly eliminated from commercial agriculture by industrial farming's focus on appearance and shipping durability rather than flavor and nutritional content. Their heirloom Cherokee purple tomatoes commanded premium prices from Manhattan restaurants, while their organic peach varieties had developed a cult following among farmers market customers who remembered what fruit was supposed to taste like before corporate agriculture optimized it for profit margins rather than taste. Carmen's expertise in soil biology had enabled them to restore fertility to land that had been depleted by decades of conventional farming before their purchase. Her research into mycorrhizal networks and beneficial bacteria had increased their yields while eliminating the need for synthetic fertilizers that contaminated groundwater and killed beneficial insects. Miguel's background in plant genetics had enabled them to develop disease-resistant varieties through traditional breeding methods that maintained genetic diversity while improving productivity. Their success had attracted attention from agricultural extension services, university researchers, and government agencies interested in sustainable farming models that could be replicated throughout the region. The farm served as a demonstration site for organic practices, hosting tours for agricultural students and providing consultation services for other farmers interested in transitioning from conventional to organic production methods. But their success had also made them targets. Consolidated Agricorp, the multinational agriculture conglomerate that controlled 67% of vegetable production in the Northeast, had been systematically acquiring independent farms throughout the Hudson Valley through a combination of predatory lending, regulatory manipulation, and economic pressure that forced family operations into bankruptcy. The Rodriguez farm's reputation for quality and its established customer relationships made it particularly valuable for Consolidated's plans to dominate the organic market while maintaining premium pricing through artificial scarcity. For 3 years, Consolidated had made increasingly aggressive acquisition offers, each rejected by Miguel and Carmen, who understood that selling would eliminate competition and ultimately harm consumers while destroying the agricultural diversity that made their region's food system resilient. Their resistance had made them symbols of independent farming that threatened Consolidated's regional expansion plans and attracted unwanted attention to the company's monopolistic practices. Emily Rodriguez had inherited her parents' intellectual rigor and moral clarity, while developing her own expertise in agricultural economics and policy analysis. At 17, she possessed the kind of comprehensive understanding of federal agricultural systems that typically took graduate students years to develop. Her academic achievements were particularly remarkable considering the physical demands of farm work and the financial pressures that had required her to contribute significantly to family income through farmers market sales and agricultural consulting work. Valley Regional High School's valedictorian had earned her academic distinction through a combination of natural intelligence, extraordinary work ethic, and a sophisticated understanding of how federal policies affected rural communities and family farming operations. Her coursework in advanced placement economics, environmental science, and government had provided the foundation for original research that had attracted attention from university professors and policy researchers throughout the region. Emily's senior thesis, Corporate Agriculture and Small Farm Displacement in the Hudson Valley, an economic analysis of market concentration and regulatory capture, had been selected for publication in the National Young Scholars Review after receiving unanimous approval from a panel of agricultural economists from Cornell University, Columbia University, and the USDA Economic Research Service. The 47-page analysis demonstrated graduate-level understanding of agricultural economics while providing original insights into corporate consolidation patterns that had not been previously documented by academic researchers. The thesis had revealed systematic coordination between consolidated agricorp and federal regulatory agencies that enabled monopolistic practices while avoiding antitrust enforcement. Emily's analysis of loan approval patterns, inspection frequencies, and regulatory enforcement had documented how federal agricultural policies were being manipulated to favor corporate operations, while creating obstacles for independent farmers who lacked the political connections necessary to navigate regulatory challenges. Her research had attracted attention from congressional staff members working on agricultural policy reform, leading to invitations to present her findings at policy conferences, typically restricted to graduate students and professional researchers. The National Young Farmers Coalition had featured her work in their policy briefing materials, while the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program had funded additional research based on her initial findings. Emily's SAT score of 1580 and her perfect scores on advanced placement examinations in economics, environmental science, and government had made her a highly sought-after candidate for the nation's most competitive universities. Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service had offered her early admission with a partial scholarship, while Harvard's Kennedy School of Government had expressed interest in her unique combination of agricultural expertise and policy analysis skills. But the financial realities of her family's situation meant that even partial scholarships would require substantial family sacrifices that could compromise the farm's operations and her parents' financial security. The Rodriguez family's income, while stable, is entirely dependent on agricultural production that could be disrupted by weather, market fluctuations, or the regulatory harassment that consolidated. Agricorp had been orchestrating against independent farmers throughout the region. Emily's acceptance to Millbrook Country Club's junior leadership program represented more than personal achievement. It was potentially the key to accessing the political connections and institutional knowledge necessary to protect her family's farm while advancing agricultural policies that supported sustainable farming operations throughout the country. The program's prestige came from its exclusive access to high-ranking government officials, federal judges, and business leaders who served as mentors for the 20 young people selected annually from thousands of applicants nationwide. The Millbrook Country Club Junior Leadership program had been established 15 years earlier through the vision of Senator Bradley Ashford, a Connecticut Republican whose family had been club members since the 1940s and whose political career had been built on relationships cultivated through Millbrook's informal networks. The program's stated mission of developing tomorrow's leaders from diverse backgrounds served multiple purposes, providing positive publicity for the club's commitment to social responsibility while creating opportunities to identify and influence promising young people before they developed independent political perspectives. Previous participants had gone on to influential careers in government, international relations, and corporate leadership, creating a network of Millbrook-connected individuals throughout American institutions. The program's alumni included 2 current federal judges, 7 congressional staff members, 12 Fortune 500 executives, and numerous diplomatic service officers who maintained their Millbrook connections throughout their careers. This network provided ongoing value to club members who could leverage these relationships for business opportunities and political influence. The selection process emphasized academic excellence, leadership potential, and diverse perspectives. But practical considerations ensured that most participants came from backgrounds that would not challenge the fundamental assumptions underlying Millbrook's political and economic activities. Scholarship recipients like Emily were carefully chosen to provide demographic diversity while ensuring that their presence would not disrupt the program's primary function as a networking and influence-building operation. The curriculum combined academic seminars on American governance with practical workshops on political networking, campaign finance, and policy development. Guest speakers included cabinet secretaries, Supreme Court justices, corporate executives, and foreign diplomats who provided insights into how American institutions actually operated versus their official descriptions in textbooks and media coverage. The program's value came not from formal education, but from access to informal networks that determined policy outcomes and career opportunities. Emily's acceptance had been particularly significant because she was the first applicant. From a farming background to be selected in the program's history, her essay about preserving family agriculture in the face of corporate consolidation had impressed the selection committee with its combination of personal experience and sophisticated policy analysis. Dr. Hawthorne had personally championed Emily's application, gouging that her agricultural expertise could provide valuable insights for club members with interests in agricultural policy and rural development. But Emily's working-class background and her family's resistance to corporate acquisition had created immediate tension with several program sponsors, particularly Harrison Blackwood, whose company had been attempting to acquire the Rodriguez farm for 3 years. Her acceptance had been approved over his objections, creating a situation that would ultimately test whether the program's commitment to diverse perspectives was genuine or merely cosmetic. The program's residential component required participants to stay in guest quarters at the club for 6 weeks, providing total immersion in Millbrook's culture of wealth and political privilege. Participants attended daily seminars, weekly networking events, and monthly formal dinners that showcased the club's connections to American political and business leadership. Experience was designed to demonstrate how informal relationships shaped formal policy while providing young people with early access to networks that would benefit their future careers. Emily arrived at Millbrook Country Club on a humid Tuesday morning in June, driving her father's 12-year-old Toyota pickup truck that looked distinctly out of place among the Mercedes sedans, BMW SUVs, and Tesla Model S vehicles that typically occupied the club's parking areas. Her best dress, a simple navy blue outfit from Target that had cost her family 2 weeks of farmers market earnings, reflected both her respect for the opportunity and the economic realities that distinguished her from participants whose families considered $300 a reasonable price for casual clothing. The club's main entrance featured double oak doors carved with the Millbrook crest and flanked by marble columns that projected institutional permanence and inherited authority. The reception area beyond displayed oil paintings of former presidents, Supreme Court justices, business titans who had shaped American policy through their Millbrook connections, creating an immediate impression of historical significance and continued political influence. Crystal chandeliers and Persian rugs created an atmosphere designed to impress visitors while reinforcing social hierarchies. Through displays of wealth that exceeded the annual income of most American families, the decor served both aesthetic and political purposes, beautiful enough to attract admiration, while expensive enough to remind visitors of their social position relative to club members who considered such luxury routine rather than exceptional. "You must be Emily Rodriguez," said Margaret Whitmore, the club's membership director, with a kind of professional courtesy that barely concealed her discomfort with Emily's obvious working-class background. Margaret's Chanel suit and Hermes accessories reflected the casual elegance that club members expected from staff who interacted with guests, while her tone suggested the careful balance between hospitality and hierarchy that characterized interactions between club employees and scholarship recipients. "Yes, ma'am. I'm incredibly grateful for this opportunity and excited to learn from the program's mentors," Emily replied with the respectful confidence that had impressed teachers and scholarship committees throughout high school. Her response demonstrated both appropriate humility and intellectual seriousness, qualities that the program claimed to value, while often preferring participants who prioritize social networking over academic inquiry. Margaret's expression tightened slightly at Emily's reference to learning from mentors, revealing the club's assumption that scholarship recipients should be grateful observers rather than active participants in policy discussions. The expectation was that Emily would absorb wisdom from her social superiors rather than contribute insights from her own experience with issues that affected millions of American families but were often misunderstood by wealthy policymakers who had never experienced economic insecurity. "Of course, dear, you'll find that our program emphasizes learning from established leaders rather than sharing personal opinions about complex policy matters that require extensive experience to understand properly," Margaret said with a condescending tone that wealthy people used when explaining social hierarchies to those they considered intellectually inferior. Despite obvious evidence to the contrary, the orientation session took place in the club's Roosevelt Room, named after Theodore Roosevelt's frequent visits during his presidency, and decorated with photographs documenting the historical connections between Millbrook and American political leadership. 20 young people from across the country had gathered to begin a summer program that promised unprecedented access to American political and business leadership, though most participants came from backgrounds that already provided such access. Through family connections, Emily immediately noticed the demographic composition of her fellow participants. 18 came from elite prep schools. 15 had parents in government or corporate leadership positions, and 12 lived in households with annual incomes exceeding $500,000. The program's commitment to diversity was represented primarily by Emily and 2 other scholarship recipients, whose presence provided demographic balance while ensuring that challenging perspectives remained safely marginalized. Welcome to Millbrook's Junior Leadership Program, announced Senator Bradley Ashford, with the practiced authority of someone accustomed to addressing young people who would benefit from his patronage throughout their careers. You represent America's future leadership, carefully selected for your academic excellence and potential for public service. This summer, you'll have unprecedented opportunities to learn from cabinet secretaries, federal judges, Supreme Court justices, and business leaders who shape American policy and economic development. Senator Ashford's opening remarks emphasize the program's mission of developing leaders who understand how American institutions really work and building networks that will serve you throughout your careers in government and business. The subtext was clear: participants were being inducted into an exclusive system that would provide career advantages unavailable to their peers from less privileged backgrounds. But these advantages came with expectations about loyalty and discretion regarding information they would encounter. The program materials distributed during orientation focused heavily on understanding existing power structures and working effectively within established systems rather than challenging institutional failures or representing diverse constituencies. The curriculum appeared designed to produce loyal participants in existing political and economic arrangements rather than innovative leaders who might question systematic problems or advocate for reforms that threatened established interests. The program's first networking reception took place in the club's Madison Room. It's named after James Madison and decorated with historical documents related to the Constitution and early American governance. The event was designed to provide informal introduction between program participants and club members who served as mentors, advisors, and potential future employers or political sponsors. Club members attending the reception represented a cross-section of American political and business leadership, federal judges who had been appointed through Millbrook networks, corporate executives whose companies benefited from favorable regulations, and government officials whose policies reflected the interests of their Millbrook connections. The informal atmosphere encouraged conversations that would have been inappropriate in official settings, while providing young people with insights into how American governance actually operated. Emily found herself in conversations that revealed the sophisticated understanding of policy issues that had earned her academic recognition and scholarship opportunities. Her questions about agricultural subsidies, regulatory capture, and corporate consolidation demonstrated knowledge that surprised adult professionals who typically encountered young people seeking career advice rather than engaging in substantive policy analysis. "That's a fascinating perspective, Emily," said Jonathan Pemberton III, whose father served as Deputy Treasury Secretary and whose grandfather had been a Supreme Court Justice. "I never realized that agriculture involved such complex policy considerations. At our family's estate in the Hamptons, we have farming operations, but management companies handle all the technical details." Jonathan's casual reference to our farming operations revealed the vast economic differences between participants while demonstrating how agricultural policy was viewed as an abstract intellectual exercise by people whose families profited from farming without understanding the daily challenges faced by working farmers. His comment also illustrated the disconnect between policymakers and the communities affected by their decisions. Agricultural policy affects rural communities, food prices, environmental quality, in international trade in ways that connect to almost every other policy area, Emily explained with the expertise that had impressed university professors and policy researchers. Small farm displacement has economic impacts on rural communities, while corporate consolidation affects consumer choice and food system resilience. Her comments attracted attention from several adult participants who recognized that Emily possessed sophisticated understanding of issues that were typically misunderstood by both policymakers and the general public. Dr. Patricia Hawthorne, observing from across the room, noted Emily's ability to engage adults in substantive conversations that went beyond typical networking pleasantries. Emily seems to have strong opinions about agricultural policy, observed Rebecca Morrison, federal appeals court judge whose husband served on Consolidated Agricorp's board of directors. I hope she understands that policymaking requires balancing many competing interests rather than simply advocating for particular constituencies. The comment revealed the judicial attitude that treating corporate interests and family farmers as equivalent competing interests rather than recognizing power imbalances that require different policy approaches to ensure fairness and competition. Emily's response would determine whether she was viewed as a promising young person who could be guided toward acceptable perspectives or a potential problem who threatened the program's carefully managed political environment. Judge Morrison, I understand that policymaking involves balancing interests, but I think it's important to recognize when systematic power imbalances prevent fair competition and democratic representation. Emily replied with respectful firmness that demonstrated both appropriate deference and intellectual independence. Agricultural policy research shows that corporate consolidation has reduced competition, increased consumer prices, and eliminated rural economic opportunities in ways that require policy responses rather than simply accepting market outcomes. As inevitable, response demonstrated exactly the kind of informed analysis and moral courage that made Emily's family's independence particularly threatening to corporate interests that preferred operating without informed public scrutiny. Her willingness to challenge accepted assumptions while maintaining respectful discourse revealed intellectual maturity that exceeded most adults' expectations for 17-year-old participants. The confrontation that would change Emily's life began during the program's third day, and participants were invited to an exclusive networking luncheon with club members who served as informal mentors and career advisors. The event was scheduled during a busy week for Washington politics, ensuring that attendees included numerous high-ranking officials who used Millbrook events to conduct political business while maintaining social cover for activities that might attract unwanted attention in official settings. Emily found herself seated at a table with Harrison Blackwood, chairman and CEO of Consolidated Agricorp, one of the most powerful agribusiness executives in America, and a man whose company had been systematically targeting her family's farm for acquisition through methods that pushed the boundaries of legal business practices. Blackwood's presence at the luncheon was not coincidental. Dr. Hawthorne had specifically arranged the seating to create an opportunity for the corporate executive to assess Emily's potential for cooperation or resistance to his company's regional expansion plans. Blackwood's appearance projected the kind of corporate authority that commanded respect in business and political circles. Expensive suit tailored to minimize his substantial weight, gold watch that cost more than most families' annual income, and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to having his preferences treated as commands by subordinates and equals alike. His reputation in agricultural industries combined business success with ruthless elimination of competition through methods that avoided antitrust enforcement while achieving monopolistic market control. "So you're the farm girl I've been hearing about," Blackwood said with casual condescension that immediately established his view of Emily as economically insignificant and socially inferior. "Dr. Hawthorne tells me you have strong opinions about agricultural policy. Tell me, what does your family grow on your little operation?" The diminutive little operation was clearly intended to minimize the Rodriguez farm's significance while establishing Blackwood's position as someone who dealt with serious agricultural enterprises rather than hobby farms that existed for sentimental rather than economic reasons. His tone suggested amusement at the idea that Emily might have insights worth considering about industries he controlled through corporate power and political influence. We specialize in organic vegetables and heritage fruit varieties for high-end restaurants throughout the metropolitan area, Emily replied professionally, unaware that she was speaking to the man whose company had been systematically targeting farms like hers for acquisition through predatory lending and regulatory manipulation. We've been certified organic for 12 years and supply over 40 restaurants, with sustainably grown produce that emphasizes flavor and nutritional content over appearance and shipping durability. Blackwood's expression shifted from casual interest to predatory calculation as he realized that Emily's family operated exactly the kind of successful organic operation that Consolidated AgriCorp needed to acquire to complete their regional market consolidation. Small farms with established restaurant relationships and organic certification represented valuable assets that could be integrated into Consolidated's industrial operations while maintaining premium pricing through artificial scarcity created by eliminating competition. Rodriguez. Blackwood mused with obvious recognition that sent a chill through Emily as she began to understand that this conversation was not the casual networking opportunity she had anticipated. That name sounds very familiar. Do yours happen to farm in the Hudson Valley? Near Millbrook, perhaps? Yes, sir, Rodriguez. Organic farm, about 15 miles from here, Emily replied with pride in her family's operation, not yet understanding that she had just identified herself as the daughter of farmers who had been refusing Consolidated's acquisition offers for 3 years while becoming symbols of independent farming that threatened the corporation's monopolistic expansion plans. Blackwood's demeanor immediately transformed from professional courtesy to hostile recognition as he realized that Emily was directly connected to one of the few remaining independent farms that stood in the way of Consolidated's complete market domination in the region. Her family's resistance to corporate acquisition had been a persistent obstacle to his company's expansion plans and a source of growing frustration for shareholders, who expected aggressive growth in market share and profit margins. Ah, yes. Your parents have been quite cooperative with Consolidated's development initiatives in the area, Blackwood said with barely concealed antagonism that revealed the corporate frustration with families who prioritized independence over financial incentives that seemed generous to people who didn't understand the long-term implications of selling to monopolistic corporations. Perhaps this conversation will help you understand that certain opportunities come with expectations about family cooperation with important business interests. Emily felt her stomach drop as she began to understand that her acceptance to the junior leadership program might have been connected to her family's business circumstances rather than her academic achievements. The possibility that her scholarship was being used as leverage against her parents' independence created a moral the dilemma that challenged everything she had believed about merit-based opportunity and institutional fairness. Mr. Blackwood, I'm not sure what you mean about my family being uncooperative, Emily said carefully, trying to maintain her composure while processing the implications of his threatening tone and the realization that her presence at Millbrook might be part of a corporate strategy rather than recognition of her academic merit. My parents operate a successful organic farm that serves an important market niche while maintaining environmental stewardship principles and providing employment. For our rural community, your parents operate a small, efficient operation that prevents optimal land use and economic development in a region that requires modernization and integration with contemporary agricultural systems. Blackwood replied with corporate rhetoric that disguised predatory business practices as economic progress and social benefit. Individual farming operations lack the economies of scale necessary for competitive pricing and efficient distribution that benefit consumers in rural communities. The conversation had attracted attention from other table participants who recognized that they were witnessing the kind of power confrontation that usually occurred behind closed doors rather than at public events designed to maintain social harmony while conducting political business. Emily's calm responses to Blackwood's increasingly aggressive comments demonstrated exactly the kind of moral courage and intellectual sophistication that made her family's independence particularly threatening to corporate interests that preferred operating without informed opposition. Mr. Blackwood, Sustainable agriculture and local food systems represent important alternatives to industrial monoculture that provide environmental benefits, economic diversity, and food security advantages that benefit entire communities. Emily replied with expertise that had earned her academic recognition and policy research opportunities. Research consistently shows that agricultural diversity increases system resilience, while family farming operations provide rural economic stability that corporate agriculture cannot replicate. Ms. Rodriguez Blackwood interrupted with dismissive authority that corporate executives used when they were accustomed to ending conversations through intimidation rather than addressing substantive challenges to their business practices. I think you'll find that idealistic notions about sustainable agriculture and local food systems are luxuries that families in your economic position cannot afford to maintain indefinitely when faced with serious business opportunities. The implicit threat was clear to everyone at the table and had been delivered with sufficient subtlety to maintain plausible deniability. While ensuring that Emily understood exactly what was being communicated, her family's farming operation was being targeted for acquisition, and her participation in the leadership program was somehow connected to corporate pressure that could affect her family's livelihood and her own. Educational opportunities. Margaret Whitmore, who had been monitoring conversations throughout the dining room with practiced attention to social dynamics that could affect the program's reputation, approached their table with obvious discomfort about the public nature of a confrontation that typically occurred through private financial pressure rather than open intimidation that might attract unwanted attention to club activities. Mr. Blackwood, perhaps this conversation would be more appropriate in a private setting where policy discussions can be conducted without affecting the program's educational atmosphere, Margaret suggested, with diplomatic concern about maintaining the careful balance between political business and social events that characterize Millbrook's operations. Actually, Margaret, I think this conversation is quite appropriate for a program designed to teach young people about how American institutions really work and how business relationships affect policy outcomes, Blackwood replied with satisfaction at having created a teaching moment about the relationship between economic power and political influence that other participants would remember throughout their careers. Emily realized that she was being used as an example for other program participants about the consequences of challenging established corporate interests and the limitations of academic achievement when confronted with systematic economic power. Her family's resistance to Consolidated's acquisition offers was being transformed into a public demonstration of how economic pressure could be applied to families who refused to cooperate with corporate expansion plans. The moment crystallized Emily's understanding that the junior leadership program was not actually designed to develop diverse leadership or encourage independent thinking, but to educate young people about existing power structures while demonstrating the personal and professional consequences of challenging corporate and political authority that controlled career opportunities and institutional access. Mr. Blackwood, family farms like ours provide economic stability, environmental stewardship, and food security that industrial agriculture cannot replicate regardless of economies of scale, Emily said with calm confidence that revealed her deep understanding of agricultural policy and rural economics. Academic research consistently demonstrates that diverse agricultural systems are more resilient, environmentally sustainable, and economically beneficial for rural communities than corporate monoculture operations that extract profits while externalizing environmental and social costs. Blackwood's face flushed with anger at being challenged by a teenage girl whose family he considered economically insignificant and politically powerless, particularly in front of other club members and program participants who were witnessing his inability to silence informed opposition to corporate agriculture practices through intimidation and economic threats. Ms. Rodriguez, you clearly don't understand the economic realities of modern agriculture or the business necessities that drive agricultural development in competitive global markets, Blackwood replied with condescending authority that corporate executives used when their expertise was challenged by people they considered intellectually and socially inferior. Despite obvious evidence of sophisticated understanding, actually, Mr. Blackwood, I understand agricultural economics quite well, Emily responded with intellectual confidence that had impressed teachers, professors, and policy researchers throughout her academic career. My senior thesis analyzed The economic and environmental impacts of corporate agriculture consolidation in the Hudson Valley, including the predatory lending practices, regulatory capture, and market manipulation that companies like yours use to force family farms into bankruptcy before acquiring their land at below-market prices. The specific reference to Consolidated's business practices created immediate tension throughout the dining room, as other club members realized that Emily possessed detailed knowledge about corporate activities that were typically concealed, from public scrutiny through legal agreements, political influence, and media management. Her academic research had apparently uncovered information about business practices that powerful interests preferred to keep private and away from regulatory oversight. Furthermore, Emily continued with the kind of systematic analysis that had earned her publication in academic journals. Federal agricultural policy research demonstrates that corporate consolidation has increased consumer prices, reduced rural employment, degraded environmental quality, and eliminated the agricultural diversity that provides food system resilience during climate disruptions and economic crises. Judge Rebecca Morrison, who had been listening with growing concern about Emily's willingness to challenge established authority figures, intervened with judicial authority designed to end uncomfortable conversations before they attracted additional attention to activities that benefited from operating without public scrutiny. Emily, dear, I think you may be misunderstanding the complex relationships between agricultural policy, business development, and regulatory oversight that require extensive experience to evaluate properly, Judge Morrison said with patronizing kindness that masked her alarm about Emily's sophisticated understanding of issues that she had assumed would be beyond a teenage participant's comprehension. Your Honor, I appreciate your perspective, but agricultural policy research is quite clear about the systematic problems created by corporate consolidation and regulatory capture. Emily replied with respectful firmness that demonstrated appropriate deference while maintaining intellectual independence. When regulatory agencies consistently approve mergers that reduce competition while ignoring antitrust violations, the resulting market concentration harms consumers, workers, and rural communities in measurable ways that policy analysis can document objectively. The response revealed exactly the kind of informed analysis and moral courage that made Emily's family's independence particularly threatening to corporate interests that relied on operating without informed public oversight or democratic accountability. Her willingness to engage in substantive policy debate while maintaining respectful discourse demonstrated intellectual maturity that exceeded most adults' expectations while threatening the carefully managed political environment that Millbrook provided for its members. Margaret Whitmore found herself caught between the program's stated commitment to diverse perspectives and intellectual development versus its practical dependence on corporate and political sponsors, who expected young participants to be grateful recipients of wisdom rather than informed critics of existing systems who might attract unwanted attention to questionable business practices. Emily, perhaps we should discuss your continued participation in the program in a private setting, where we can address any concerns about program expectations and participant behavior standards, Margaret said with obvious discomfort about making educational decisions based on corporate pressure rather than academic merit or legitimate behavioral violations. Ms. Whitmore, I haven't violated any program rules, behavioral standards, or codes of conduct. Emily replied with calm logic that had consistently impressed teachers and academic mentors throughout her educational career. My only apparent offense is engaging in informed policy discussion with someone whose business practices directly affect my family and thousands of other farming families throughout the region. The moral clarity of Emily's position created an uncomfortable situation for other program participants, who were witnessing exactly the kind of power confrontation that their families had taught them to avoid through compliance with established authority rather than principled resistance to institutional pressure that could affect their future opportunities and career prospects. Jonathan Pemberton III and several other participants exchanged glances that revealed their discomfort with Emily's willingness to challenge powerful interests in ways that could affect her future opportunities while potentially creating complications For other program participants who preferred to maintain positive relationships with corporate and political mentors, who controlled access to prestigious universities and career opportunities. Emily Rodriguez. Margaret announced with official tone that indicated a final decision had been made despite the absence of any legitimate educational or behavioral justification. Your participation in the Millbrook Country Club Junior Leadership program is hereby terminated effective immediately.
Oh.
Please gather your personal belongings and leave the premises. The public band created immediate silence throughout the dining room as club members and program participants realized they were witnessing the kind of institutional retaliation that was typically handled through private pressure rather than public confrontation that might attract media attention or regulatory scrutiny to club activities and corporate practices. Emily gathered her worn canvas messenger bag with quiet dignity that contrasted sharply with the wealth and privilege surrounding her, maintaining her composure despite the public humiliation and the destruction of educational opportunities that had represented her family's best hope for political influence and institutional access. "Thank you for the educational opportunity, Ms. Whitmore," Emily said with sincere politeness that maintained her dignity while making clear that she understood exactly what was happening and why her removal had nothing to do with program standards or educational objectives. "I've learned a great deal about how American institutions really work and how economic power operates to silence informed opposition to corporate interests." As Emily walked toward the club's main entrance, she passed beneath oil paintings of presidents and Supreme Court justices who had shaped American policy through their Millbrook connections, understanding for the first time how economic power operated to exclude voices that threatened established interests while maintaining systems that benefited the wealthy at the expense of working families and democratic accountability. The massive oak doors of Millbrook Country Club closed behind Emily with the finality of institutional rejection. But they had also opened her eyes to exactly how political and economic power operated to maintain systems that served elite interests, while silencing informed opposition from families like hers who challenged corporate authority through principled resistance and factual analysis. As Emily walked down the tree-lined drive toward the main gate, processing the humiliation and trying to understand how her academic achievement had been transformed into punishment for challenging corporate authority, she noticed her phone buzzing. With what appeared to be urgent text messages from her parents, the first message read, "Emily, where are you? It's very important, you call immediately." The second message was more specific. "Uncle David is flying to New York today. Something about your situation at the club. Please call now. Uncle David." Rodriguez was her father's younger brother who had taken a very different path from Miguel's agricultural career. After graduating from West Point and serving 2 tours in Afghanistan as an Army intelligence officer, David had transitioned to federal law enforcement and eventually to his current position with the Secret Service Presidential Protective Division. Emily had always admired her uncle's dedication to public service, but she had no idea why her situation at a country club would concern someone who protected the President of the United States. Before she could process her parents' messages or return their calls, the distinctive sound of multiple vehicle engines approached from behind her position near the club's main gate. Emily turned to see 3 black SUVs with government license plates pulling up the circular drive toward the club's main entrance, followed by additional vehicles that clearly belonged to some kind of official convoy. The precision and coordination of their arrival suggested federal authority rather than local law enforcement. With radio communications audible through open windows and personnel, deployment that indicated a planned operation rather than a routine visit, the vehicle's formation, and the obvious security protocols being implemented, suggested significant official business that went far beyond normal government interactions with private organizations. As the convoy reached the club's main entrance, Emily could see men and women in dark suits emerging from the vehicles with the kind of professional efficiency that indicated federal law enforcement or security services. Their coordinated movement and obvious authority suggested significant official business that reached far beyond routine government interactions with private social organizations. Through the club's large Georgian windows, Emily could see the networking luncheon participants and club members reacting with obvious alarm to the arrival of what appeared to be a substantial federal presence. The casual atmosphere of political networking and business discussion had been transformed into something that resembled a law enforcement operation, with club staff moving quickly to secure areas and members reaching for their phones to contact attorneys and political allies. Rasim Blackwood was visible through the main dining room windows, his earlier confidence replaced by obvious concern as he engaged in urgent conversation with other club members, while repeatedly checking his phone for messages from his corporate legal team. The transformation from corporate authority to defensive positioning suggested that the federal presence represented more than routine oversight or social visits that club members typically manage through political connections. Dr. Patricia Hawthorne could be seen moving efficiently through the club's main areas, apparently implementing security protocols that suggested Millbrook had prepared for exactly this type of federal intervention. Her coordination with club staff and her obvious familiarity with emergency procedures indicated that the possibility of federal investigation had been anticipated and planned for, revealing another layer of the club's sophisticated political operations. Emily's phone continued buzzing with messages, but before she could read them, one of the federal agents approached her position near the gate with the kind of professional courtesy that suggested she might be relevant to whatever official business had brought them to Millbrook. "Excuse me, miss," the agent said with polite authority, while displaying credentials that identified him as Special Agent Michael Torres of the United States. "Secret Service? Are you Emily Rodriguez?" The specific use of her name created immediate understanding that her presence at the club was not coincidental to the federal operation. Whatever had brought the Secret Service to Millbrook Country Club was somehow connected to her family, her situation, or her uncle's position within the federal government. "Yes, sir. I'm Emily Rodriguez," she replied with the respectful composure that had characterized her interactions with authority figures throughout her academic career, despite her confusion about how her family could be connected to Secret Service operations. "Ms. Rodriguez, I'm Special Agent Torres. Your uncle, Agent David Rodriguez, has asked me to ensure your immediate safety and to escort you to a secure location where he can brief you about developments that affect your family's security," Agent Torres explained with professional courtesy. That suggested federal protection rather than investigation or enforcement action. "My family's security?" Emily asked with growing concern about implications that extended far beyond her academic disappointment at being banned from the leadership program. "Is something wrong with my parents? Is our farm in danger?" "Your parents are safe and have been placed under federal protection as a precautionary measure," Agent Torres assured her with obvious respect for her intelligence and right to understand. "Her family's situation, your uncle will explain the full circumstances. But preliminary investigation has revealed threats to your family's safety that require immediate federal response." The revelation that her family required federal protection transformed Emily's understanding of her situation from academic setback to genuine danger that somehow connected her banned participation in a country club program to threat serious enough to warrant Secret Service intervention. As Agent Torres guided Emily toward one of the federal vehicles, she could see additional Secret Service personnel establishing a security perimeter around the club's main entrance, while other agents entered the building with what appeared to be search warrants and official documentation that suggested comprehensive federal investigation rather than routine oversight. "Agent Torres, what kind of threats require federal protection for farmers who grow organic vegetables?" Emily asked with the logical directness that had characterized her approach to complex problems throughout her academic career. "Ms. Rodriguez, your family's situation intersects with a federal investigation into activities that pose national security concerns," Agent Torres replied with careful honesty that revealed the seriousness of federal interest while maintaining appropriate restrictions about classified information. "Your uncle will provide a complete briefing, but your family's business circumstances and your experience at this club are relevant to ongoing federal operations." The connection between her family's farming operation and national security seemed incomprehensible until Emily began to consider the corporate pressure they had been experiencing and the sophistication political networks she had observed during her brief time at Millbrook Consolidated Agricorp's acquisition activities were connected to federal crimes or foreign interests. Her family's resistance could have made them targets for retaliation that extended beyond normal business pressure. Through the federal vehicle's windows, Emily could see additional government cars arriving at the club with personnel who appeared to represent different federal agencies based on their equipment and operational procedures. The coordination between multiple agencies suggested investigation of activities that crossed jurisdictional boundaries and required specialized expertise from various federal departments. "Ms. Rodriguez," Agent Torres said as they departed the club grounds, "Your uncle wanted me to tell you that your courage in challenging powerful interests during the program has provided federal investigators with evidence that confirms intelligence we've been developing for over a year. Your willingness to speak truth to power may have prevented serious threats to democratic institutions." The statement transformed Emily's understanding of her confrontation with Harrison Blackwood from personal humiliation to potential contribution to federal law enforcement operations. Her academic knowledge about corporate agriculture practices and her family's experience with corporate pressure had apparently provided insights that confirmed federal suspicions about activities that threatened national security and democratic governance. As their convoy moved through Westchester County toward what Agent Torres described as a secure federal facility, Emily processed the realization that her desperate attempt to access educational opportunities had accidentally intersected with federal operations designed to protect American democratic institutions from systematic threats that operated behind the facade of legitimate business and social activities. The secure federal facility turned out to be a discrete office building in white plains that housed a joint task force investigation center where multiple federal agencies coordinated complex cases involving financial crimes, foreign interference, and threats to democratic institutions. Emily was escorted to a comfortable conference room where her uncle, Special Agent David Rodriguez, was waiting with documents and briefing materials that would transform her understanding of her family's situation and her country's political realities. Uncle David's appearance reflected both his military background and his current federal responsibilities, professional bearing that projected competence and authority, while maintaining the warmth that had characterized their family relationship throughout Emily's childhood. Its expression combined relief at her safety with obvious concern about developments that had required federal intervention to protect their family. "Emily, I'm proud of you for standing up to Harrison Blackwood and maintaining your principles despite institutional pressure," David said with obvious admiration for her courage, while embracing her with the protective affection that had made him her favorite uncle throughout her childhood. "Your willingness to challenge his corporate practices provided federal investigators with confirmation about activities we've been investigating for months." "Uncle David, I don't understand how challenging corporate agriculture practices at a country club could be relevant to federal investigations," Emily said with the logical directness that had characterized her approach to complex problems throughout her academic career. "What kind of federal crimes could be connected to agricultural business and social clubs?" "Emily, what you witnessed at Millbrook Country Club represents a sophisticated political money laundering operation that has been funneling illegal campaign contributions through charity events and membership fees for nearly 8 years," David explained with the kind of careful honesty that federal agents used when briefing civilians about national security matters. "Harrison Blackwood and other club members have been using Millbrook's social activities to avoid federal election law enforcement while influencing policy outcomes that benefit their business interests." The revelation transformed Emily's understanding of her experience from social rejection to accidental discovery of systematic corruption that threatened democratic governance through the kind of financial manipulation she had studied in her academic research about regulatory capture and corporate influence on agricultural policy. "Your confrontation with Blackwood confirmed federal intelligence about how the money laundering operation targets families who threaten corporate interests," David continued with obvious respect for Emily's intelligence and right to understand her family's situation. "Your family's resistance, too, to Consolidated's acquisition offers made you targets for retaliation that extends far beyond normal business pressure. Tomorrow, we'll reveal how Uncle David's federal investigation had been tracking Millbrook's political money laundering for 18 months, and why Emily's academic research about corporate agriculture had accidentally provided the missing evidence needed to expose a $50 million corruption scheme that reached the highest levels of the current presidential administration. What Uncle David was about to reveal to Emily would expose how Millbrook Country Club had been operating as the nerve center for the largest political money laundering scheme in American history. A sophisticated operation that had illegally funneled over $50 million to congressional campaigns, while systematically targeting families like the Rodriguezes who threatened corporate monopolies. If you're just joining us, make sure to catch up on yesterday's episode. Don't forget to subscribe, because what we uncover tomorrow about how this corruption reaches into the current presidential administration will leave you absolutely speechless. The secure federal facility in White Plains bore no resemblance to the mahogany-paneled elegance of Millbrook Country Club. Instead, Emily found herself in a sterile conference room equipped with the kind of advanced technology that suggested the most sensitive federal investigations, multiple computer monitors displaying financial data, encrypted communication systems, wall-mounted screens showing organizational charts that mapped connections between individuals and entities. She was only beginning to understand. Special Agent David Rodriguez had transformed from the beloved uncle who taught Emily to ride horses on the farm into a federal law enforcement professional, whose demeanor reflected years of protecting national security interests and investigating threats to democratic institutions. His briefing materials were organized with military precision, documenting an investigation that had consumed 18 months of federal resources and involved coordination between multiple agencies that typically operated independently. Emily, before I explain what we've discovered about Millbrook and Harrison Blackwood, I need you to understand that what you're about to learn is classified at levels that require security clearances and ongoing federal protection, David said. With the careful authority that characterized interactions between federal agents and civilian witnesses, whose safety depended on understanding operational security requirements, Uncle David, I understand that federal investigations involve classified information, but I need to know why our family requires protection and how my experience at the country club connects to national security concerns. Emily replied with the logical directness that had characterized her approach to complex problems throughout her academic career. The conference room's main screen displayed a sophisticated organizational chart that mapped financial connections between Millbrook Country Club, dozens of corporate entities, political campaigns, international organizations that Emily couldn't immediately identify. The complexity of the network suggested systematic coordination rather than simple campaign finance violations, with money flows that crossed national boundaries and involved entities that appeared to serve no legitimate business purposes. What you're looking at represents the most sophisticated political money laundering operation ever documented by federal law enforcement, David explained as he highlighted specific connections within the network that revealed systematic violations of federal election laws, tax regulations, and foreign agent registration requirements. Millbrook Country Club has been serving as the coordination center for an operation that has illegally influenced congressional elections, Supreme Court nominations, and federal regulatory decisions for nearly 8 years. The revelation transformed Emily's understanding of her country club experience from social exclusion to accidental discovery of systematic corruption that threatened the fundamental operation of American democratic institutions. The sophisticated networking events and charity galas she had observed were apparently elaborate cover operations for activities that violated multiple federal laws while influencing policy outcomes that affected millions of American families. How does political money laundering work through a country club? Emily asked with the analytical curiosity that had earned her academic recognition and publication opportunities. I understand campaign finance violations in general terms, but I don't see how social events and membership fees could be used to avoid federal election law enforcement. David's response revealed the sophistication of an operation that had been designed by experts in campaign finance law, tax regulations, and international banking systems who understood how to exploit regulatory gaps and enforcement limitations to achieve systematic violation of democratic oversight while maintaining plausible legal cover for obviously criminal activities. Emily, The Millbrook operation works by using multiple layers of apparently legitimate transactions to disguise illegal campaign contributions and foreign money as domestic charitable donations and business expenses. David explained while displaying financial records that documented systematic manipulation of federal election laws through sophisticated accounting methods that required expert knowledge to detect and prosecute. The screen showed how corporate entities controlled by Millbrook members purchased event sponsorships and membership upgrades that were priced far above their apparent value, with the excess amounts being transferred through subsidiary organizations, two political campaigns and super PACs that supported candidates favorable to corporate interests represented by club members. For example, Harrison Blackwood's Agricultural Corporation purchased a $500,000 agricultural policy seminar sponsorship for an event that cost $12,000 to organize. David explained while highlighting specific transactions that revealed systematic overpricing designed to move money from corporate accounts to political activities. The remaining $488,000 was transferred through the club's Policy Research Foundation, two campaigns supporting congressional candidates who voted against agricultural antitrust enforcement. The systematic nature of the overcharging scheme revealed coordination between corporate executives who understood federal election law limitations and club administrators who had developed mechanisms for avoiding regulatory detection while achieving the same results as direct campaign contributions. That would have been illegal under federal campaign finance laws. But that's not the most serious aspect of the operation. David continued while displaying international banking records that revealed connections to foreign entities that were prohibited from participating in American electoral activities under federal law. Foreign corporations and government entities have been using similar mechanisms to influence American elections through contributions that appear to originate from domestic sources. The foreign connections transformed the investigation from campaign finance violations to potential violations of foreign agent registration requirements and federal laws, prohibiting foreign interference in American electoral processes. The international scope suggested coordination with adversarial foreign governments that sought to influence American policy outcomes through systematic corruption of democratic institutions. Emily studied the financial records with growing understanding of how the sophisticated operation had avoided detection through compartmentalization that prevented any single transaction from appearing suspicious, while achieving systematic influence over American political processes that affected agricultural policy, environmental regulations, and judicial appointments that determined legal interpretations for decades. Uncle David, this explains why Mr. Blackwood was so confident about pressuring our family and why he seemed to expect my removal from the program to be automatically accepted by club administration, Emily observed with analytical insight that revealed her understanding of how systematic corruption operated to silence opposition and maintain operational security. Exactly, Emily. Your family's resistance to Consolidated's acquisition offers threatened their regional monopoly plans, while your academic research about corporate agriculture practices revealed systematic problems that could attract regulatory attention to their business activities. David confirmed with obvious respect for her analytical capabilities and understanding of complex political and economic relationships. The investigation had revealed that Emily's family had been specifically targeted not just for their agricultural land, but for their potential to expose corporate practices that violated federal antitrust laws and environmental regulations. The Rodriguez farm's success as an independent organic operation demonstrated that alternatives to corporate agriculture were economically viable, threading Consolidated's narrative that agricultural consolidation was necessary for economic efficiency and consumer benefit. Emily, federal surveillance of Consolidated's communications revealed that your family had been identified as a priority acquisition target, not just for your land, but because your parents' expertise in sustainable agriculture and your academic research were attracting attention to systematic problems with corporate agricultural practices. David explained while displaying intercepted communications that documented corporate strategy meetings focused on eliminating opposition to their expansion plans. The communications revealed that Consolidated had developed sophisticated strategies for identifying and neutralizing families who posed threats to their business operations through public attention, academic research, or political advocacy that could lead to regulatory enforcement or antitrust investigation. The company had invested substantial resources in monitoring university research, agricultural publications, and policy conferences to identify potential sources of opposition to their consolidation activities. Your acceptance to the Millbrook program was not coincidental. David continued with information that revealed the systematic nature of corporate influence operations. Harrison Blackwood specifically requested that you be invited to the program as part of a strategy to either co-opt your research or discredit your family's opposition to agricultural consolidation. The revelation that her academic achievement had been manipulated for corporate political purposes created a new understanding of how systematic corruption operated to identify and neutralize threats to established interests before they could attract public attention or regulatory scrutiny. Emily's scholarship opportunity had been transformed into a corporate influence operation, designed to either silence her research or provide justification for retaliation against her family's independence. How did federal investigators discover corporate communications about targeting our family? Emily asked with concern about surveillance methods and her family's privacy during what should have been private business communications between corporate executives planning potentially illegal activities. Federal investigation began when your academic research was cited in a congressional staff report about agricultural antitrust violations. David explained with information that revealed how Emily's scholarly work had attracted federal attention to systematic problems that required law enforcement investigation. Your analysis of corporate consolidation patterns provided evidence that congressional investigators needed to request federal antitrust enforcement against agricultural monopolies. Congressional interests had triggered federal surveillance of corporate communications to determine whether antitrust violations were occurring through coordination between agricultural corporations that should have been competing independently. The surveillance had revealed systematic price fixing, market allocation agreements, and coordinated strategies for eliminating independent farmers through predatory business practices that violated multiple federal laws. Your family's situation became relevant to federal investigation when corporate communications revealed plans to use intimidation and economic pressure against families who threatened their monopolistic activities. David continued with obvious concern about threats. Two civilian families who had become targets for corporate retaliation due to their principled resistance to systematic business violations. Federal investigation had discovered that Millbrook Country Club served as the coordination center for corporate executives who needed to plan illegal activities while maintaining social cover that would provide plausible explanations for their meetings and communications. The club's exclusive membership and social atmosphere enabled systematic violation of antitrust laws through informal coordination that appeared to be casual conversation between friends, rather than criminal conspiracy between competitors. Emily. Federal surveillance revealed that Harrison Blackwood and executives from 7 other agricultural corporations hold regular meetings at Millbrook to coordinate pricing strategies, divide geographic markets, and plan systematic elimination of independent farmers through predatory practices. David explained while displaying evidence that documented systematic antitrust violations that had increased consumer prices while destroying rural economic opportunities. The antitrust violations were coordinated with the political money laundering operation to ensure that congressional and regulatory officials would not enforce federal laws that prohibited corporate coordination and market manipulation. Campaign contributions through the Millbrook operation were specifically directed to candidates who opposed antitrust enforcement and supported deregulation that enabled continued corporate consolidation. The agricultural antitrust conspiracy alone would justify federal prosecution. But the investigation revealed connections to similar operations in other industries that suggested systematic corruption of American democratic institutions. David continued with information that revealed the scope of federal concerns about institutional threats that extended far beyond agricultural policy. Federal investigators had discovered that corporate executives from defense contractors, pharmaceutical companies, financial institutions, and technology corporations were using similar mechanisms to coordinate market manipulation while influencing political outcomes that protected their illegal activities from regulatory enforcement. The Millbrook operation represented a model that was being replicated by corporate interests throughout the American economy. How many industries are involved in similar political money laundering operations? Emily asked with growing understanding of how systematic corruption threatened democratic governance and economic competition throughout American society. Federal investigation has identified similar operations in 12 major industries, with evidence suggesting coordination between corporate executives who share strategies for avoiding regulatory enforcement while maintaining market control through illegal activities. David replied with information that revealed the scope of threats to American democratic and economic institutions. The systematic nature of corporate coordination across multiple industries suggested a level of threat to democratic governance that extended far beyond individual campaign finance violations or antitrust enforcement. Federal investigators were documenting evidence of systematic corporate conspiracy to subvert American democratic institutions through coordinated influence operations that maintained oligopolistic control over major sectors of the American economy. Emily's academic research about corporate agricultural practices had provided federal investigators with analytical frameworks and evidentiary documentation that confirmed intelligence they had been developing through surveillance operations. Her scholarly analysis of consolidation patterns, regulatory capture, and predatory business practices had identified systematic problems that federal enforcement agencies had suspected but lacked sufficient documentation to prosecute effectively. Emily, your senior thesis provided federal prosecutors with economic analysis that explains how corporate agricultural practices violate federal antitrust laws in ways that can be presented to juries and federal judges, David explained with obvious respect for her analytical capabilities and contribution to federal law enforcement operations. Your documentation of predatory lending practices, regulatory manipulation, and systematic elimination of competition provided evidence that confirms federal intelligence about criminal activities that require prosecution to protect American agricultural markets and rural communities. David continued while displaying sections of Emily's research that had been incorporated into federal indictments and regulatory enforcement actions. The academic rigor of Emily's research had provided federal prosecutors with credible analysis that could withstand legal challenges from corporate defense attorneys, who typically argued that business practices that appeared predatory were actually legitimate competitive activities that benefited consumers and promoted economic efficiency. But your research value extends beyond agricultural antitrust violations. David continued with information that revealed broader implications of Emily's analytical work for federal investigations into systematic coordination across multiple industries. Your analysis of how regulatory capture enables corporate consolidation while avoiding antitrust enforcement provided federal investigators with analytical frameworks that apply to similar patterns in other industries where corporate coordination threatens competition and democratic governance. David explained with information that revealed how Emily's academic work had contributed to understanding systematic threats to American economic and political institutions. Federal investigators had used Emily's analytical methods to examine corporate coordination in pharmaceutical markets, defense contracting, financial services, and technology industries, discovering similar patterns of systematic antitrust violations. Coordinated with political influence operations designed to prevent regulatory enforcement. Emily, your academic work has contributed to federal investigations that will result in the largest antitrust enforcement actions in American history, David said with obvious pride in her scholarly achievements and their contribution to protecting democratic institutions and economic competition from systematic corporate threats. The most sensitive aspect of the federal investigation involved connections between the Millbrook money laundering operation and current officials in the presidential administration who had received illegal campaign contributions through the club's sophisticated financial network. Federal surveillance had revealed systematic coordination between corporate executives and government officials who made policy decisions that benefited their business interests while violating federal ethics laws and campaign finance regulations. Emily, this is the most classified aspect of our investigation. Your safety depends on understanding how serious these revelations are for national security and democratic governance. David said with obvious concern about protecting civilian witnesses whose knowledge of federal operations could make them targets for retaliation from powerful interests that had committed systematic violations of federal law. The classified briefing materials revealed that 3 current cabinet secretaries, 7 federal judges, and 12 congressional committee chairs had received illegal campaign contributions through the Millbrook operation while making policy decisions that directly benefited corporate interests that had funded their campaigns through the club's money laundering network. The investigation has documented systematic corruption of American government institutions through coordinated influence operations that violate multiple federal laws while threatening the fundamental operation of democratic governance. David explained with information that revealed why. Federal investigators considered the Millbrook operation a national security threat rather than simple campaign finance violations. The systematic nature of the corruption suggested coordination with foreign interests that sought to influence American policy outcomes through systematic compromise of democratic institutions. Federal counterintelligence operations had identified connections between the Millbrook network and foreign corporations that served as fronts for adversarial foreign governments seeking to influence American agricultural policy, environmental regulations, and judicial appointments. Uncle David, you saying that foreign governments have been using the Millbrook operation to influence American elections and policy decisions? Emily asked with growing understanding of how domestic corruption connected to international threats that extended far beyond campaign finance violations. Federal counterintelligence analysis suggests that adversarial foreign governments have been using the Millbrook network to influence American policy outcomes while maintaining plausible deniability through domestic corporate entities that appear to be legitimate American business interests. David replied with information that revealed the international scope of threats to American democratic sovereignty. The foreign connections transformed the investigation from domestic corruption to potential national security violations that required coordination between federal law enforcement, counterintelligence agencies, and diplomatic institutions responsible for protecting American sovereignty from foreign interference operations. Federal investigation had revealed that Emily's family represented one case in a systematic pattern of corporate retaliation against individuals and families who threatened monopolistic business practices through academic research, investigation, regulatory complaints, code political advocacy that could attract federal enforcement attention to antitrust violations and systematic corruption. Emily, federal surveillance documented Consolidated's development of target lists that identified over 200 families throughout the country, whose resistance to corporate acquisition or whose research and advocacy threatened their business operations. David explained while displaying intelligence that revealed the systematic nature of corporate retaliation against civilian families. The targeting operation included sophisticated surveillance of university research, agricultural publications, environmental organizations, and rural advocacy groups to identify individuals whose work could potentially threaten corporate interests. Through regulatory enforcement, policy changes, or public attention that might lead to congressional investigation or federal prosecution. Your family was specifically targeted because your parents' successful organic operation demonstrated that alternatives to corporate agriculture were economically viable, while your academic research provided documentation of systematic corporate violations that could support federal antitrust enforcement. David continued with information that revealed why the Rodriguez family had become a priority target for corporate retaliation. Federal investigation had discovered that similar targeting operations were being conducted by corporate interests in other industries, with systematic surveillance and retaliation against journalists, researchers, advocacy organizations, and individual families whose work threatened monopolistic business practices and systematic violation of federal regulations. How many families are being targeted by similar corporate retaliation operations? Emily asked with concern about the scope of threats to civilian families whose principled resistance to corporate violations made them targets for systematic intimidation and economic pressure. Federal investigation has documented targeting operations against over 800 families throughout the country, with evidence suggesting systematic coordination between corporate interests that share intelligence about potential threats to their business operations. David replied with information that revealed the systematic nature of corporate threats to civilian families and democratic institutions. The coordination between corporate interests across multiple industries suggested a level of systematic threat to democratic governance that extended far beyond individual cases of corporate retaliation. Federal investigators were documenting evidence of organized conspiracy to suppress opposition to corporate violations through systematic intimidation that threatened fundamental rights of American citizens to engage in legitimate research, advocacy, and political participation. Federal law enforcement response to the Millbrook investigation involved coordination between agencies that typically operated independently, requiring specialized prosecutors with expertise in campaign finance law, antitrust enforcement, counterintelligence operations, and international financial crimes that crossed jurisdictional boundaries and involved classified intelligence about foreign threats to American democratic institutions. Emily. The federal response to this investigation will involve the largest coordinated law enforcement operation in American history. David explained with information that revealed the scope of federal resources being deployed to address systematic threats to democratic governance and economic competition that had been operating without effective oversight for nearly a decade. The investigation had been designated as a priority national security operation that required coordination between the Department of Justice, its Federal Bureau of Investigation, Secret Service, Treasury Department, Department of Agriculture, and intelligence agencies responsible for protecting American institutions from foreign interference operations. Federal prosecutors are preparing indictments that will charge over 150 individuals with violations of federal campaign finance laws, antitrust regulations, foreign agent registration requirements, and conspiracy to defraud the United States government. David continued with information that revealed the systematic nature of federal enforcement actions that would result from the investigation. The prosecution strategy involved simultaneous enforcement actions against corporate executives, government officials, and club administrators who had participated in systematic violation of federal laws while coordinating with foreign interests that sought to influence American policy outcomes through corruption of democratic institutions. What happens to families like ours who have been targeted by corporate retaliation operations? Emily asked with concern about protection for civilian witnesses whose cooperation with federal investigation could make them targets for continued intimidation and economic pressure from powerful interests facing federal prosecution. Federal witness protection protocols include ongoing security monitoring, relocation assistance, if necessary, and legal protection against retaliation through federal prosecution of anyone who threatens witnesses or their families, David assured her with information about comprehensive federal resources available to protect civilian families, whose cooperation was essential for successful prosecution of systematic threats to democratic institutions. Federal agents had placed Emily's parents under protective custody while conducting searches of consolidated agri-court facilities and corporate executives' residences to secure evidence of systematic violations before documents could be destroyed, or witnesses could be intimidated into refusing cooperation with federal investigations. Emily, your parents are safe and have been relocated to a secure federal facility where they can continue managing your farm operations while remaining under federal protection during the prosecution phase of our investigation, David explained. With information about immediate family security while federal law enforcement operations continued, the farm's operations were being maintained through federal agricultural agents who understood organic certification requirements and sustainable farming practices that needed to continue during the investigation to preserve the Rodriguez family's livelihood and demonstrate that alternatives to corporate agriculture remained economically viable despite systematic corporate pressure. Federal agricultural economists are documenting the economic impact of corporate retaliation against independent farmers, like your parents, to provide evidence for antitrust prosecution while ensuring that successful operations like yours continue. Demonstrating that agricultural diversity benefits consumers in rural communities, David continued with information about broader federal support for families. affected by corporate consolidation and systematic violations. The federal protection included educational opportunities that would enable Emily to continue her academic development while contributing to policy research that supported federal enforcement efforts against systematic corporate violations. Several universities had offered her scholarships for agricultural policy programs that would provide advanced training while supporting federal investigations into corporate agriculture practices. Emily, Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service has offered you a full scholarship for their agricultural policy program, with opportunities to work with federal prosecutors and congressional staff who are developing legislation to prevent systematic corporate violations, David explained, with information about educational opportunities that would enable her to continue her academic and policy work while remaining under federal protection. The Millbrook investigation represented federal recognition that systematic corporate coordination threatened the fundamental operation of American democratic and economic institutions in ways that required comprehensive enforcement response, involving multiple agencies and specialized prosecution resources that had never been deployed against corporate threats to democratic governance. Emily, this investigation will result in fundamental changes to how federal agencies monitor and enforce laws against systematic corporate coordination that threatens competition and democratic institutions. David explained with information about policy reforms that would strengthen federal capabilities to detect and prosecute similar operations before they could achieve systematic corruption of American governance. The investigation had revealed gaps in federal enforcement capabilities that had enabled systematic corporate coordination across multiple industries while avoiding regulatory detection through sophisticated legal and financial mechanisms that exploited limitations in agency coordination and prosecutorial resources. Federal agencies are developing enhanced surveillance capabilities, improved coordination protocols, and specialized prosecution teams that will prevent future operations like Millbrook from achieving systematic corruption of American democratic institutions. David continued with information about institutional reforms that would protect democratic governance from systematic corporate threats. The broader implications included international cooperation with allied governments that were documenting similar threats to democratic institutions from systematic corporate coordination that crossed national boundaries and involved foreign interference operations designed to undermine democratic governance and economic competition. As David concluded his briefing about the federal investigation, Emily understood that her accidental discovery of systematic corruption at Millbrook Country Club had intersected with federal operations designed to protect American democratic institutions from threats that extended far beyond individual campaign finance violations or antitrust enforcement. Emily, tomorrow you'll learn about the most sensitive aspect of our investigation, how the Millbrook operation connects to foreign interference in American presidential elections, and why your uncle's position in the Presidential Protective Division made your family a target for systematic retaliation that threatens national security as well as democratic governance. David said with obvious concern about revelations that would expose threats to American sovereignty that had been operating without effective oversight. The federal investigation had discovered that adversarial foreign governments had been using the Millbrook network to influence American presidential elections through systematic corruption of democratic institutions while maintaining plausible deniability through domestic corporate entities that appeared to be legitimate American business interests. The evidence we've developed will expose the largest foreign interference operation in American history. And your family's resistance to corporate pressure accidentally provided federal investigators with intelligence that confirmed our worst fears about systematic threats to American democratic sovereignty. David continued with information that revealed the international scope of federal concerns about institutional threats. Tomorrow, we'll reveal how foreign intelligence services had been using Millbrook's political money laundering network to influence American presidential elections and why Emily's academic research about corporate agriculture accidentally exposed a sophisticated operation designed to compromise American democratic institutions through systematic corruption that reached the highest levels of the current presidential administration. The story was accelerating toward revelations that would expose the full scope of foreign threats to American democratic sovereignty. And Emily was beginning to understand that her family's principled resistance to corporate pressure had accidentally contributed to protecting American institutions from systematic foreign interference operations that threatened the fundamental operation of democratic governance. What Emily Rodriguez was about to learn would trigger the largest federal prosecution in American history, expose a foreign intelligence operation that had been manipulating presidential elections for 3 consecutive cycles, and transform 17-year-old farm girl into the most protected witness in federal custody. The revelation that Uncle David was about to share would prove that her family's simple resistance to corporate pressure had accidentally disrupted a sophisticated foreign conspiracy designed to control American agricultural policy, environmental regulations, and Supreme Court nominations through systematic corruption that reached the current President of the United States. This is the conclusion that will change everything you thought you knew about American democracy. The secure federal facility's main briefing room had been transformed overnight into a command center that reflected the highest levels of federal law enforcement and national security operations. Multiple screens displayed real-time surveillance feeds, international intelligence reports, organizational charts that mapped connections between foreign intelligence services, domestic political figures, and corporate entities that Emily was only beginning to understand represented threats to American democratic sovereignty. Special Agent David Rodriguez had been joined by Deputy Attorney General Sarah Chen, FBI Director Michael Harrison, and Treasury Secretary Robert Martinez officials whose presence indicated that Emily's accidental discovery at Millbrook Country Club had intersected with federal operations designed to protect the fundamental structure of American democratic institutions from systematic foreign interference. Emily, what I'm about to reveal to you is classified at the highest levels of national security. Your family's safety depends on understanding how serious these revelations are for American sovereignty and democratic governance.
David said.
With the gravity that characterized federal officials responsible for protecting national institutions from existential threats, the main screen displayed a classified intelligence assessment titled Operation Potomac Influence: Foreign Intelligence Penetration of American Democratic Institutions Through Systematic Corruption Networks. The document's classification markings indicated information that typically required presidential authorization to declassify, revealing the extraordinary nature of intelligence that Emily's situation had helped federal investigators develop. Emily. Federal counterintelligence operations have determined that adversarial foreign governments have been using the Millbrook Country Club network to influence 3 consecutive American presidential elections through systematic corruption of campaign finance, judicial appointments, and regulatory decisions that affect agricultural policy, environmental protection, and international trade agreements. Deputy Attorney General Chen explained with information that revealed the scope of foreign threats to American democratic processes. The foreign interference operation had been coordinated by intelligence services from 3 adversarial nations that had developed collaborative agreements for systematically compromising American democratic institutions while maintaining plausible deniability through domestic corporate entities and political organizations that appeared to represent legitimate American interests. The Millbrook operation served as the primary mechanism for foreign intelligence services to channel illegal funding to American political campaigns, while influencing policy decisions that benefited foreign economic and strategic interests at the expense of American agricultural communities, environmental protection, and rural economic development. FBI Director Harrison continued with intelligence that revealed systematic foreign exploitation of American political processes. The foreign influence operation had specifically targeted agricultural policy because food production and rural economic stability represented strategic vulnerabilities that foreign adversaries could exploit to undermine American economic security, while creating social instability in rural communities that typically supported traditional American political institutions. Federal counterintelligence investigation had revealed that foreign intelligence services had identified American agricultural policy as a strategic target for systematic influence operations designed to create economic dependence on foreign food imports while eliminating American agricultural diversity that provided food security and rural economic resilience. Emily. Foreign intelligence analysis identified family farms like yours as strategic targets because independent agricultural operations represented obstacles to foreign economic penetration of American food systems. Treasury Secretary Martinez explained, while displaying classified intelligence reports that documented foreign planning for systematic elimination of American agricultural independence. The foreign strategy involved coordinating with domestic corporate interests that shared foreign objectives for eliminating American agricultural diversity while creating market concentration that could be manipulated through international supply chain disruptions and economic pressure that would force American dependence on foreign agricultural imports. Your family's resistance to consolidated AgriCorp's acquisition offers accidentally disrupted foreign intelligence planning that required systematic elimination of independent American farmers to achieve agricultural market concentration that could be controlled through foreign influence operations. David continued with intelligence that revealed why Emily's family had become targets for retaliation that extended far beyond domestic corporate pressure. Foreign intelligence services had developed sophisticated strategies for identifying and neutralizing American families whose agricultural expertise and economic independence threatened foreign objectives for creating American dependence on foreign food supplies, while eliminating rural political constituencies that traditionally supported American sovereignty and democratic independence. The foreign operations specifically targeted agricultural researchers and policy experts, whose work could expose systematic threats to American food security and rural economic stability. Deputy Attorney General Chen continued with information that revealed why Emily's academic research had attracted foreign intelligence attention through domestic corporate entities that served foreign strategic objectives. Federal counterintelligence operations had discovered that foreign intelligence services had been systematically monitoring American university research, agricultural publications, and policy conferences to identify academic work that could threaten foreign agricultural influence operations through regulatory enforcement or policy changes that would protect American agricultural independence. The most sensitive aspect of the federal investigation involved evidence that foreign intelligence services had achieved systematic influence over current officials in the presidential administration through the Millbrook money laundering network that had provided illegal campaign contributions while creating compromising relationships that enabled foreign manipulation of American policy decisions. Emily, this information requires presidential security clearances, but your family's safety depends on understanding how foreign intelligence operations have compromised American government institutions through systematic corruption that threatens national sovereignty, David said with obvious concern about protecting civilian witnesses whose knowledge of federal intelligence operations could make them targets for foreign retaliation. The classified briefing materials revealed that foreign intelligence services had achieved influence over 7 current cabinet secretaries, 12 federal judges, and 15 congressional committee chairs through systematic campaign contributions and personal financial benefits that created compromising relationships. While violating federal ethics laws and foreign agent registration requirements, foreign intelligence services specifically targeted American officials responsible for agricultural policy, environmental regulations, and judicial appointments that affected corporate consolidation and regulatory enforcement. FBI Director Harrison explained with intelligence that revealed systematic foreign penetration of American government institutions, responsible for protecting democratic sovereignty and economic independence. The foreign influence operation had achieved systematic control over American agricultural policy through compromised officials who made regulatory decisions that benefited foreign economic interests while eliminating American agricultural independence and rural economic resilience that traditionally supported American democratic institutions. The investigation has documented foreign intelligence coordination with domestic corporate entities to influence American presidential elections through systematic campaign finance violations that created compromising relationships with current government officials. Deputy Attorney General Chen continued with intelligence that revealed foreign achievement of influence over American Presidential decision-making. The foreign operation had specifically targeted American agricultural and environmental policy because rural economic stability and agricultural independence represented strategic vulnerabilities that foreign adversaries could exploit to undermine American economic security while creating political instability in communities that supported traditional American democratic values. Emily's academic research about corporate agricultural practices and her family's resistance to systematic corporate pressure had provided federal counterintelligence operations with analytical frameworks and evidentiary documentation that confirmed classified intelligence about foreign operations targeting American agricultural independence and rural economic stability. Emily, your scholarly analysis of corporate consolidation patterns and regulatory capture provided federal investigators with evidence that confirmed our worst fears about systematic foreign penetration of American agricultural policy through domestic corporate entities that serve foreign strategic objectives. David explained with obvious respect for her analytical contributions to protecting American national security. Your documentation of predatory business practices and systematic elimination of independent farmers provided intelligence analysts with evidence that foreign operations were achieving systematic control over American food production while eliminating rural political constituencies that traditionally resist foreign influence. Treasury Secretary Martinez continued, while displaying sections of Emily's research that had been incorporated into classified intelligence assessments about threats to American sovereignty. The academic rigor of Emily's research had provided federal prosecutors with credible analysis that could withstand legal challenges from defense attorneys representing foreign agents and compromised American officials who would argue that their activities represented legitimate business relationships rather than systematic foreign intelligence operations. But your strategic value extends beyond academic research. Deputy Attorney General Chen continued with information that revealed broader implications of Emily's analytical work for federal operations, protecting American democratic institutions from systematic foreign threats. Your family's principled resistance to corporate pressure provided federal counterintelligence operations with real-time intelligence about foreign operational methods and target selection criteria that enabled us to identify and disrupt similar operations before they could achieve systematic compromise of other American families and institutions. FBI Director Harrison explained with intelligence that revealed Emily's contribution to protecting American sovereignty from systematic foreign threats. Federal investigators had used Emily's experience and analytical insights to develop enhanced surveillance capabilities and enforcement protocols that protected other American families from foreign retaliation while strengthening federal capabilities to detect and disrupt foreign intelligence operations before they could achieve systematic corruption of American democratic institutions. Federal law enforcement response to the foreign intelligence operation involved simultaneous enforcement actions across 12 states and coordination with allied foreign governments. Zone democratic institutions had been targeted by similar systematic foreign interference operations that threatened international security and democratic sovereignty. Emily, the federal response began at dawn today with coordinated arrests of 147 individuals involved in foreign intelligence operations against American democratic institutions. David explained with information about the largest coordinated law enforcement operation in American history. The simultaneous enforcement actions involve federal agents conducting searches of Millbrook Country Club, consolidated AgriCorp facilities, congressional offices, federal agencies, and corporate headquarters while arresting foreign agents and compromised American officials who had participated in systematic violation of federal laws protecting American sovereignty and democratic governance. Federal prosecutors have filed charges against Harrison, Blackwood, and 12 other corporate executives for conspiracy to violate federal campaign finance laws, antitrust regulations, and foreign agent registration requirements while serving foreign intelligence objectives. Deputy Attorney General Chen announced, with information about prosecutions that would dismantle systematic threats to American economic independence and democratic sovereignty. The prosecution strategy involved coordination with international law enforcement agencies and diplomatic institutions to address foreign intelligence operations that had threatened democratic institutions throughout the international community. while maintaining systematic pressure on American agricultural independence and rural economic stability. Foreign intelligence officers operating under diplomatic cover have been expelled from the United States, while foreign corporations that served as fronts for intelligence operations have been designated as national security, a threat subject to asset forfeiture and criminal prosecution. Treasury Secretary Martinez continued with information about comprehensive federal response to systematic foreign threats. The international scope of enforcement actions included coordination with allied governments that had discovered similar foreign intelligence operations targeting their own agricultural independence and democratic institutions through systematic corruption that threatened international security and economic sovereignty. Congressional leadership had been briefed about the foreign intelligence operation and was developing legislative responses designed to strengthen federal capabilities for detecting and prosecuting systematic foreign interference in American democratic institutions while protecting families, like the Rodriguezes, from corporate retaliation that served foreign strategic objectives. Emily. Congressional intelligence committees are using your academic research and your family's experience to develop legislation that will protect American agricultural independence while strengthening federal enforcement capabilities against systematic foreign interference. David explained with information about policy reforms that would protect American sovereignty from similar threats. The congressional response included enhanced funding for federal agencies responsible for monitoring foreign intelligence operations, strengthened penalties for foreign agent violations, and expanded protection for American families whose resistance to corporate pressure served American national security interests. Congressional agricultural committees are developing legislation that will break up corporate agricultural monopolies while protecting family farms like yours from systematic foreign pressure that threatens American food security and rural economic independence. Deputy Attorney General Chen continued with information about policy reforms that would address systematic threats to American agricultural sovereignty. The legislative response included enhanced antitrust enforcement capabilities, expanded support for independent agricultural operations, and strengthened protection for agricultural researchers whose work contributed to protecting American food security from foreign manipulation and economic coercion. Congressional leadership has committed to comprehensive reforms that will prevent future foreign intelligence operations from achieving systematic corruption of American democratic institutions while protecting families whose principled resistance serves American sovereignty. FBI Director Harrison announced with information about institutional changes that would strengthen American democratic resilience against foreign threats. The Millbrook investigation had revealed that similar foreign intelligence operations were targeting democratic institutions throughout the international community, requiring coordinated response from allied governments that shared American concerns about systematic threats to democratic sovereignty and economic independence. Emily. Allied intelligence services have confirmed that foreign adversaries have been conducting similar operations against democratic institutions in Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, and throughout the European Union, David explained, with classified intelligence that revealed the international scope of foreign threats to democratic governance and economic sovereignty. The international coordination of foreign intelligence operations suggested systematic foreign strategy for undermining democratic institutions throughout the international community while creating economic dependence that could be exploited for political influence and strategic coercion that threatened international security and democratic stability. International law enforcement coordination is developing enhanced capabilities for detecting and prosecuting foreign intelligence operations that threaten democratic sovereignty while strengthening protection for families and institutions that resist systematic foreign pressure. Treasury Secretary Martinez continued with information about international cooperation that would protect democratic institutions from systematic foreign threats. The international response included enhanced intelligence sharing, coordinated law enforcement operations, and diplomatic initiatives designed to impose consequences on foreign governments that conducted systematic interference operations against democratic institutions while violating international law and diplomatic agreements. Allied governments are implementing comprehensive reforms designed to strengthen democratic resilience against systematic foreign interference while protecting agricultural independence and rural economic stability that support democratic governance. Deputy Attorney General Chen announced with information about international cooperation that would protect democratic sovereignty from similar threats. The international scope of reforms included enhanced protection for agricultural independence, strengthened enforcement against foreign economic coercion, and expanded support for families and institutions whose resistance to foreign pressure served democratic sovereignty and international security. 6 months after her ban from Millbrook Country Club, Emily Rodriguez had been transformed from a desperate scholarship student to one of the most protected witnesses in federal custody. While contributing to the largest prosecution of foreign intelligence operations in American history, Emily, your courage in challenging Harrison Blackwood at Millbrook Country Club provided federal investigators with evidence that confirmed our intelligence about systematic foreign threats to American democratic institutions. David said with obvious pride in her contribution to protecting American sovereignty while pursuing her own educational and career aspirations. Emily's family had been relocated to a secure federal facility that enabled them to continue their agricultural operations while remaining under federal protection during prosecution of foreign agents and compromised American officials who had threatened their safety through systematic retaliation that served foreign strategic objectives. The federal government has provided your family with expanded agricultural land, enhanced organic certification support, and research opportunities that will enable you to continue developing sustainable farming practices while contributing to American agricultural independence. Deputy Attorney General Chen announced with information about federal support for families whose resistance to foreign pressure served American national security interests. Emily's academic achievements had attracted attention from federal agencies and congressional committees responsible for developing policy responses to systematic foreign threats, leading to scholarship opportunities and research positions that would enable her to continue contributing to protecting American agricultural sovereignty and democratic independence. Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service has offered you a full scholarship for their agricultural policy and national security program, with opportunities to work with federal prosecutors and congressional investigators who are developing legislation to prevent systematic foreign interference. David explained with information about educational opportunities that would enable Emily to continue her academic and policy work while contributing to protecting American democratic institutions. The scholarship program included specialized training in counterintelligence analysis, agricultural policy development, international law enforcement that would prepare Emily for career opportunities in federal service while continuing her family's commitment to protecting American agricultural independence and rural economic stability. The Rodriguez Organic Farm had been transformed from a target for corporate acquisition into a symbol of American agricultural independence, while serving as a demonstration site for sustainable farming practices that protected American food security from foreign manipulation and economic coercion. The federal government has provided your family with expanded agricultural land, enhanced organic certification support, and research opportunities that will enable you to continue developing sustainable farming practices while contributing to American agricultural independence. Deputy Attorney General Chen announced with information about federal support for families whose resistance to foreign pressure served American national security interests. Emily's academic achievements had attracted attention from federal agencies and congressional committees responsible for developing policy responses to systematic foreign threats, leading to scholarship opportunities and research positions that would enable her to continue contributing to protecting American agricultural sovereignty and democratic independence. Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service has offered you a full scholarship for their agricultural policy and national security program, with opportunities to work with federal prosecutors and congressional investigators who are developing legislation to prevent systematic foreign interference. David explained with information about educational opportunities that would enable Emily to continue her academic and policy work while contributing to protecting American democratic institutions. The scholarship program included specialized training in counterintelligence analysis, agricultural policy development, international law enforcement that would prepare Emily for career opportunities in federal service while continuing her family's commitment to protecting American agricultural independence and rural economic stability. The Rodriguez organic farm had been transformed from a target for corporate acquisition into a symbol of American agricultural independence. While serving as a demonstration site for sustainable farming practices that protected American food security from foreign manipulation and economic coercion. Emily, your family's farm has been designated as a federal research facility for developing agricultural practices that strengthen American food security while supporting rural economic independence that serves national security objectives. Treasury Secretary Martinez announced with information about federal recognition of the Rodriguez family's contribution to protecting American agricultural sovereignty. The farm's operations had been expanded through federal support that enabled increased production of heritage agricultural varieties while providing research opportunities for university students and federal agricultural specialists who were developing enhanced capabilities for protecting American food systems from foreign threats and economic manipulation. Federal agricultural economists are using your family's farming practices as a model for legislation that will support independent agricultural operations while strengthening American food security against systematic foreign pressure. FBI Director Harrison continued with information about policy development that would protect American agricultural independence from foreign intelligence operations. The federal designation included enhanced security protection, expanded research funding, and policy development opportunities that would enable the Rodriguez family to continue their agricultural operations while contributing to protecting American food security from systematic foreign threats that targeted rural economic stability and agricultural independence. Your parents' expertise in sustainable agriculture has been recognized through federal consulting positions that will enable them to contribute to developing agricultural policies that protect American food security while supporting rural communities that resist foreign economic pressure. Deputy Attorney General Chen announced with information about federal employment opportunities that provided security and career advancement while serving national security objectives. The federal recognition included ongoing security protection, educational support for Emily's continued academic development, and research opportunities that would enable the Rodriguez family to continue their agricultural operations while contributing to policies that protected American agricultural sovereignty and democratic independence. Federal agencies responsible for protecting American democratic institutions had developed enhanced capabilities for detecting and prosecuting systematic foreign interference operations while strengthening protection for American families whose resistance to foreign pressure served national security interests. Emily, federal agencies have implemented comprehensive reforms designed to prevent future foreign intelligence operations from achieving systematic corruption of American democratic institutions while protecting families like yours from retaliation that serves foreign strategic objectives. David explained with information about institutional changes that would strengthen American democratic resilience against foreign threats. The institutional reforms included enhanced surveillance capabilities for detecting foreign intelligence operations, improved coordination between federal agencies responsible for protecting democratic sovereignty, and expanded protection for civilian families whose principled resistance to foreign pressure contributed to American national security. Congressional oversight committees have implemented enhanced monitoring of foreign influence operations, while strengthening protection for agricultural researchers and policy experts whose work contributes to protecting American food security from foreign manipulation. Deputy Attorney General Chen continued with information about legislative reforms that would protect American sovereignty from systematic foreign threats. The congressional reforms included expanded funding for federal agencies responsible for protecting agricultural independence, enhanced penalties for foreign interference in American democratic processes, and strengthened support for families and institutions that resisted systematic foreign pressure through principled opposition and informed analysis. Federal law enforcement agencies have developed specialized capabilities for prosecuting foreign intelligence operations while protecting American families whose resistance to foreign pressure serves democratic sovereignty and national security. FBI Director Harrison announced with information about enhanced federal capabilities for protecting American democratic institutions from systematic foreign threats. The law enforcement reforms included specialized prosecution teams with expertise in foreign intelligence operations, enhanced international cooperation for addressing systematic threats to democratic sovereignty, and expanded protection for witnesses whose cooperation contributed to prosecuting foreign agents and compromised American officials. Emily's transformation from desperate scholarship student to protected federal witness had provided her family with security, educational opportunities, and career prospects that exceeded their original hopes for social mobility and economic stability while contributing to protecting American democratic institutions from systematic foreign threats. Emily, your courage in challenging powerful interests at Millbrook Country Club has protected American democratic institutions from systematic foreign interference while providing your family with opportunities to continue your agricultural operations and academic pursuits under federal protection. David said with obvious satisfaction about protecting civilian families, whose principled resistance served American national security interests. Emily's health and educational development had flourished under federal protection that provided access to advanced educational resources, security from corporate retaliation, and opportunities to contribute to policy development that protected American agricultural independence and democratic sovereignty from systematic foreign. The prosecution had resulted in convictions of 127 foreign agents and compromised American officials while dismantling systematic foreign influence operations that had threatened American agricultural independence, democratic sovereignty, and rural economic stability for nearly a decade. Federal courts have imposed sentences totaling over 800 years of imprisonment, while ordering asset forfeiture of $2.30 billion in illegal proceeds from foreign intelligence operations that violated American sovereignty and democratic governance. FBI Director Harrison announced with information about judicial consequences for systematic foreign threats to American democratic institutions. The judicial response included enhanced penalties for foreign agent violations, expanded asset forfeiture capabilities for prosecuting foreign intelligence operations, and strengthened protection for American families whose resistance to foreign pressure contributed to protecting democratic sovereignty and national security. Congressional legislation based on your family's experience and your academic research will provide permanent protection for American agricultural independence, while strengthening federal capabilities for detecting and prosecuting systematic foreign interference in democratic institutions. Deputy Attorney General Chen announced with information about legislative reforms that would protect American sovereignty from similar threats. The legislative response included comprehensive reforms that strengthened American agricultural independence, enhanced protection for rural economic stability, and expanded federal capabilities for protecting democratic institutions from systematic foreign threats that exploited corporate consolidation and regulatory capture. Emily's contribution to exposing systematic foreign intelligence operations had attracted international recognition from allied governments and international organizations responsible for protecting democratic sovereignty and agricultural independence from systematic foreign threats and economic coercion. Emily, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization has selected you to receive the Young Democracy Defender Award for your contribution to protecting democratic institutions from systematic foreign interference through principled resistance and academic excellence. David announced with information about international recognition of Emily's courage and analytical contributions. The international recognition included opportunities to address international conferences about protecting democratic sovereignty from systematic foreign threats, while contributing to policy development that strengthened international cooperation for addressing foreign intelligence operations that targeted democratic institutions throughout the international community. Allied governments have invited you to participate in international youth leadership programs designed to develop enhanced capabilities for protecting democratic institutions from systematic foreign interference while strengthening agricultural independence and rural economic stability. Treasury Secretary Martinez continued with information about international opportunities that would enable Emily to continue contributing to protecting democratic sovereignty. The international opportunities included educational exchanges, policy research positions, and diplomatic training that would prepare Emily for career opportunities in international service, while continuing her family's commitment to protecting agricultural independence and democratic governance from systematic foreign threats. International law enforcement agencies have recognized your family's contribution to exposing systematic foreign intelligence operations while requesting your assistance with developing enhanced capabilities for protecting democratic institutions from similar threats. FBI Director Harrison announced with information about international cooperation that would enable Emily to contribute to protecting democratic sovereignty worldwide. Emily Rodriguez's journey from desperate farm girl to protected federal witness had demonstrated that individual courage and principled resistance could protect democratic institutions from systematic foreign threats while achieving personal success and family security through federal recognition and support. Emily, your family's story will be taught in federal law enforcement academies and diplomatic training programs as an example of how individual families can contribute to protecting American sovereignty through principled resistance to systematic foreign pressure. Deputy Attorney General Chen concluded with recognition of the Rodriguez family's contribution to protecting democratic institutions. The Rodriguez family's experience had become a model for federal programs designed to protect American families from foreign retaliation while strengthening democratic resilience against systematic threats that exploited corporate consolidation and regulatory capture to achieve foreign strategic objectives. The Rodriguez Family Foundation for Agricultural Independence has been established to provide legal assistance, security consulting, and educational resources for families who discover evidence of foreign interference in American agricultural policy while resisting corporate pressure that serves foreign strategic objectives. David announced with information about ongoing legacy programs that would protect other families from similar threats. The Foundation's work included enhanced protection for agricultural researchers, expanded support for independent farming operations, and strengthened capabilities for detecting and prosecuting foreign intelligence operations that targeted American food security and rural economic stability. Emily's academic work continued through federal scholarship programs and research, opportunities that enabled her to contribute to policy development while pursuing her educational goals under federal protection that ensured her safety from foreign retaliation and corporate pressure. Your commitment to protecting American agricultural independence and democratic sovereignty will continue through federal service opportunities that enable you to contribute to national security while pursuing your academic and career aspirations. Treasury Secretary Martinez concluded with information about ongoing opportunities for service and contribution. The story that began with a 17-year-old's desperate attempt to access educational opportunities had evolved into protection of American democratic institutions from systematic foreign threats while demonstrating that individual courage could achieve both personal success and national service through principled resistance to foreign pressure and systematic corruption. Emily Rodriguez had inherited far more than her family's farming legacy. She had inherited the responsibility for protecting American agricultural independence and democratic sovereignty from systematic foreign threats. Her courage in fulfilling that responsibility had strengthened America's resilience against foreign interference, while creating opportunities for other families to resist systematic pressure through federal support and protection. The country club that had rejected Emily for challenging corporate authority was now a federal crime scene. But her real legacy lived in enhanced protection for American democratic institutions and the knowledge that ordinary families could protect sovereignty through civic courage, moral clarity, and determination to choose truth over convenience when confronted with systematic threats to democratic governance. Emily Rodriguez's mission was complete. The family she had fought to protect had exceeded every expectation for courage, integrity, and commitment to the democratic values that make justice possible even when it requires extraordinary personnel, sacrifice, and federal protection from systematic foreign threats. The story was finished, but the work of protecting democracy through individual courage and institutional resilience would continue for as long as free societies needed families who were brave enough to choose truth over comfort, justice over safety, and public service over personal convenience. When confronted with systematic threats to democratic sovereignty and national independence, up next you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. This one hit the mark. You won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.